Hey guys, and welcome to Betwixt the Books, where today we are going to be reviewing Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher, which is, I don't know what number book she's written because she also writes under Ursula Vernon for kids' books, but like the fourth book by Tor that she's publishing within the last couple of years. This one is a fairy tale fantasy retelling sort of thing. Girl asleep in a tower with thorns, being held by a fairy. But the fairy in this case isn't a fairy, and actually the girl's the fairy, and the fairy in this case is a human that was taken into the fairy world and all of that. So a twist on the classic fairy story. Gretchen will do a better description of this one. I have an ARC copy. This is not what the cover of the book looks like. I'll probably put an actual cover of the book up there so you know what it looks like. But I got this from work when I saw it come in. I snagged it immediately because we read What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher last year and both really loved that one. So if you want to see a review of that, it's up there. And we'll talk about this one more in this video, but if you haven't heard of it, I'll let Gretchen do a better review because she always does like a sum up of the books way better than I do. My ADHD is like this thing and then that thing. There you go.
Words, character, story.
Did it.
Yeah, so this book opens up with our main character, Toadling. Toadling was born human, but she was raised and like spirited away to the fairy world before she had even taken a sip of her mother's milk. And that basically means when she's brought to these kind of river toad fairy spirit situation, she starts eating like pond scum and stuff, very tasty, I'm sure, and basically like becomes more them than human. She is something in between. Because before she can make her full transition into this particular type of fairy, one of the goddesses of fairy shows up and is like, hey, we have a thing for you to do. So they pick her up and send her back to the human world to take care of the changeling who was left in her place. At this point, Toadling finds out that she should have been a princess, and there is this fairy creature pretending to be her, and that fairy creature is very, very dangerous, and it is now her job to contain that fairy creature who stole her life, which I'm sure is a very easy thing to wrap one's mind around. Toadling, however, botches the spell she is sent there to cast and ends up basically guarding the tower sleeping thorn situation.
Yes.
Until a Muslim knight named Halim shows up, basically 200 plus years after this first started, and it sets off a chain of events, which are the bulk of the story.
Yes. Overall impressions, I guess I'll go first because you just talked. Long story short, both of us were kind of like meh on this one. Like 3 stars. It's fine. It was fine. I just, when we were talking about this, said that I kind of like floated along with the story. It's 100 pages. Like I read like 50 pages yesterday and 50 pages today, and that was fine. I like enjoyed where it was going. I didn't get bored. It was short enough that like you just kind of floated along with it. It definitely has the fairy tale quality of like pretty and like a little bit mysterious. There is a little bit of horror in there in the like monstrosity, very, very little. Like this is not a horror book, but some, you know, you could tell that she's a horror writer because there's those elements there. Anybody who writes horror, I feel like there's always like a little taste of it somewhere hidden in there. You can't get away from it. But it feels more or less like, yep, okay, that was a fairy tale story. Like like pretty much like, yes, okay, yep, fairy story, nailed it. There was some beautiful writing, there were some good lines. But like even just having just read it today, I was struggling to remember like character names or like creature names that were listed here, which shouldn't be the case, but I think it was just because like it just kind of was, and you just kind of went with it. I wasn't like invested super hard into it or like needing to use my brain all that much. So like if you're looking for something that's short, sweet, like popcorny, would recommend picking this one up. specifically probably from the library. Again, it's tiny. It's like 100 pages. I don't know that you need to go out and buy a copy of this right now. I would say go out and buy a copy of What Moves the Dead. That's great. Go get that and love it and support the author. Support this author by borrowing the book from the library, I would say, for this one in this case.
I think I might have gone into this with too much expectation, because when we did read What Moves the Dead, that is a horror novella, two things I hate, and it's a retelling of Poe's House of Usher. I've never read that before. And so I was like, I don't have the background context for this. I hate horror. I never like novellas. And so I was just like, I'm not going to like this. But I really was deeply compelled by that story, the characters, even the horror elements. Like, it was just so beautifully written and kind of turned on its head and interesting that I was very pumped about it. And so when we got the arc of this book, which is, I read mine from Edelweiss. Thank you to Edelweiss and the publisher for my copy. I was really excited because I'm a fantasy person, right? And this is a Sleeping Beauty, twisted tale. And I was like, I have read 15,000 different versions of, Sleeping Beauty. Like, I'm ready. And just from the beginning, it lacked very much compelling. And indeed, I struggled with certain choices that were made in an effort for the structure of the book. It starts off in the present, so with Halim kind of arriving and Totaling being at the tower, and then it will go back and forth between what happened to the present moment, basically through the lens. It doesn't start this way, but it ends up being through the lens of Totaling telling Halim what happened.
Yeah.
But this whole time, she's letting Halim hack his way towards the tower when there is a very, very dangerous creature spelled asleep inside, so she doesn't murder the planet.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, we're not just gonna. I have significant issues with the ending. I don't really want to spoil that for anybody, but to have like questionable story and then a very typical ending just kind of felt frustrating to me, because I know T. Kingfisher can do better and I expected it to be better, and then it just kind of was.
I mean, I think the thing that's the most interesting and that's going to grab most people about this is that it is an interesting concept, right? Like the human that was taken to the fairy world now has to go back and guard the fairy creature that replaced her. So like that concept is like really interesting and definitely something that like called out to us when we were looking at the arcs of which like T. Kingfisher arc that we wanted to read next. And I think that a lot of people will gravitate towards it, and it is definitely an interesting idea, but like that's where it like sits. I feel like it doesn't do anything more with it. And when you think of fairy tales, a lot of times you think about how they're like morality stories or things that they're supposed to like teach you something from reading it. And I don't really think that this had that. Like, we both came out of it like, okay, it was an enjoyable little story, but like, why did I read it? Like, what did I get out of it? It felt like it was all concept. And while there's stuff, we're not saying the execution was bad, because again, T. Kingfisher's a good writer. Like, we need to like impress upon you that like some of the writing in here was beautiful, but there needs to be more to a story, even if it is a novella and just something so short. Like what was the point of reading this? Like, why were we reading it? What do we get out of it?
My first comment to Michaela when she finished it was, what was the point of the ending? Like, what was it doing? What was it trying to say? Because it just kind of went bloop. Yeah. And I was like, what is happening? And again, I didn't have that sensation from What Moves the Dead. It was a very compact story that definitely left you like, oof, Yeah. And in the author's note, which I did read, even T. Kingfisher just calls this a very sweet story. And that's not a bad thing at all. And if that is what you are looking for, is like a very short story that is going to have some interesting elements, but isn't going to expect your brain to like run into overdrive and like high drama. Like, you just want to there is something to be said about enjoying something you can read and coast along. I did not expect that to be the tone of this book. And so when that was what it was, my expectation made me disappointed.
The only thing when Gretchen and I were sitting here and chatting about like what possibly could be like an interesting thing to take out of this was the discussion in here about beauty and what beauty was. Obviously, we all know the story of like the fair maiden in the tower. Like, she's beautiful. The monster of our story is physically beautiful. The blonde, long hair, beautiful creature who is evil, capital E, evil. Like you want to talk about the horror elements? It's right there with that monster of a thing.
The 8-year-old blonde child doing creepy things with corpses.
Yeah. You can see it. But the thing that was like actually like quite interesting to me was that there was a point before Toadling was sent to do this spell on the child where she was like being taught by some fairy tutors so that she would be able to like portray herself as a fairy creature in order to do this. And they talked about beauty and like what beauty meant, and Toadling's response was that the most beautiful thing is whoever is oldest, because that's what the like specific the green teeth that she was raised by felt. So like the matriarch or whatever, the like oldest green teeth was the most beautiful. And she like describes different elements of all of these elder figures in the community that she came from, which we would describe, like the things that she described would be like grotesque. But to Toadling, those are the things that make them beautiful. These green teeth are
also like toad creatures.
Yes, yeah, toad creatures.
So
you get it. Again, you get it. It's like the opposite of what you would expect. But this idea that like there's beauty in age, I think is very interesting and telling. There are points when Toadling later is talking with Halim and she like says to herself like, but I'm not beautiful. Like, why are you trying to save me? Because Halim comes back to the tower not to necessarily get the pretty princess, but to save Toadling from a curse that he thinks is placed upon her. And she's like, no, I'm not cursed.
I'm not cursed.
I'm not cursed. And he's like,
in
it's
fact,
okay.
I did the cursing.
Yeah. I did maybe do a curse. But like she says, I'm not pretty. And he says, that's fine. I'm not good looking either. Like, I just like you're sad and lonely. Like, I want to help you. But like that's maybe the only discussion in all of this that has like any sort of like interest or difference or merit, is this discussion of what beauty is. And even then it's like kind of on the nose of like the pretty thing is dark on the inside and the ugly thing is good on the inside, like it's kind of that.
So sometimes authors' notes are at front of books and sometimes they're at the back. And this novella makes the choice to put the author's note at the back of the book. The author's note also includes like the acknowledgments and stuff like that, which is fine. But the author's note here includes, besides what I've already mentioned about like it being a sweet story, includes what I feel is very important context, which is that this book, Thornhedge, was the first novella that T. Kingfisher sold to Tor. It is the third novella after Nettle and Bone.
Fourth, actually, I think.
She says third in the author's note.
I think it's fourth, because Nettle and Bone, What Moves the Dead, and A House with Good Bones all came out before this one did.
She does not mention House with Good Bones in the author's note.
So this one may have gotten pushed since the arc came out, because yeah, I think it is. I think it's the fourth. House with Good Bones came out in the spring, and this one came out now. Author's note wrong.
Yeah, I don't know what to tell you, but the author herself as third. Either way, it's the oldest written story, but it's later in publication date. And Michaela and I have talked about this in the past, where we love doing things like series or returning to authors that we've read before and some later books that they've written to see the growth in the author's writing, their abilities. Because, I mean, writing is hard, and sometimes you can't learn without writing a novel, and then you publish it and you learn and you grow and you keep going. And so I'm really worried that some people not understanding where Thornhedge is in her like actual writing journey might read this and kind of see like a regression or an author who is like not getting better or potentially even getting worse, when it just so happened that the publication schedule put this one later.
Yeah.
My personal belief for that is because those earlier books are more compelling, in order to generate buzz and interest in T. Kingfisher as a writer, they wanted to start off strong.
Mm.
I have no proof for any of this. That's my personal feeling. But I feel like if you're going to read this book, that is important context as well. If you are expecting, like I was, something that would be What Moves the Dead, but better. And that's not, again, not that it's bad, but it's not that.
Yeah, it definitely feels like an older book. Like it feels like this is like one of the first things that she's doing to play around with this like novella format, because it's something, all of these are short works. Like she's not writing like, 300-page fantasy books. It's like these little bites and pieces that you're getting. And she definitely was able to fit a lot more into What Moves the Dead, like thematically, along with the retelling, along with some changes, and adding interesting elements of representation. So like What Moves the Dead had some sexuality representations. This one has, obviously the knight is Muslim, so like there's definitely like twists in that way of making things a little bit less whitewashed. But like it definitely feels like it isn't as strong as those other ones are, which again, that's fine. Like not every book is going to be a 5-star book for us. But if you need to pick up a T. Kingfisher, I think we both would say we would rather you pick up What Moves the Dead than this one. Because I think most people will have a better time with that one and will get more out of that reading experience than they would with this. Again, if all you want is that light, popcorny, like float along, cute little fantasy story, this one's a good one. But I don't know if it's worth like buying a hardcover good,
So we do not want to belabor the point. This was short, it was sweet. We're not sorry that we read it. We just didn't like it as much as the last one we read. We have not read the other two works by this author in the same vein, like this novella horror fantasy thing. So if you have and you think that they are better or have thoughts about those, please do tell us down in the comments, because novellas are quite easy to read and we would be happy to do so. But just let us know your thoughts. Other than that, the next couple of things that we have coming up are a reading roundtable in September. So we will have 2 friends joining us to just talk about whatever we're reading and tell you a little bit about it, chat about it. We've done this 3 separate times now, and we have generated interesting and different conversations every time. Everybody's always brought a really interesting title to the table. And while in September, it's just open, everyone's going to bring whatever they're reading at the time. We are also really excited that we're planning some themed episodes for later on in the year, so you can look forward to those. Michaela and I's next review should be one of those series reviews I was just talking about, because our Betwixt the Books Buddy Challenge said to read an entire series this year. We could have picked a duology. We picked a quintet.
Yeah.
We made some choices. So
I mean, it's middle grade. It's middle grade.
Yeah, you can just barely see it right there. The 5 books in the Percy Jackson series that we never read as young people. I have finished them. Michaela's going, but we are on track to have a whole 5-book series review published when we planned to do that. So proud of us for accomplishing that. So you can look forward to both of those things, and more goodies coming in that we have planned for the rest of the year. We here at Betwixt the Books, we do planning now. Be impressed.
Never
Thanks, guys. Bye.